to the RevRx podcast. My name is Chad Potts. I'm your host. And on this podcast, we discuss all things faith, family, and health. Today, I'm so excited to have with me a special guest, Meagan Ryan. As a registered dietitian, she is truly an expert in the field of nutrition. And in our conversation, she delves into the depths of what does it look like to have a healthy relationship with food. What is the role of food in our overall health? And why you never have to diet again. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure that you leave us a review, that you subscribe and follow us, and make sure that you never miss out on a new episode of the RevRx podcast. Thanks for joining us. See you soon. Today, I'm so excited to have with me Meagan Ryan. She and her husband, Patrick, have an awesome fitness business together, just overall health. And they're coupling together, literally, to make quite a difference in this world when it comes to getting people healthy. So, Meagan, it's a privilege and honor to have you with me today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here and to be a part of your show.
Awesome. So Meagan is a registered dietitian, and she has a unique story kind of behind that. So can you share with us just a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it as condensed as I can. But basically my story begins when I was around 24 years old, and in your early 20s, I was not living the healthiest life. I think many people can relate to that in your early 20s.
Absolutely.
But there's always this voice in the back of my head, like, your health is important. Like, I think we all kind of have that voice in the back of our heads, like kind of trying to keep us accountable to some things, right? And so one day I saw a friend of mine who was a bodybuilder, and he had posted about a bodybuilding competition that he had won. And I messaged him and I was like, hey, like, how do I do this? Like, how do I, and I didn't know at the time anything about bodybuilding. I just saw him and was like, he must be healthy, right? It was very generalized. And so thankfully he was a friend. He was a close friend. So he kind of took me under his wing and showed me the ropes in the gym. And I started figuring stuff out on my own as far as the nutrition is concerned. And so during that time, I actually lost 25 pounds, and I really felt great initially, like those first few months. I was eating way better food more consistently. I was hydrating myself, so of course I was going to feel great. And so that feeling of just being like, wow, like this mental fog had been lifted from me so significantly. I was like, I want to learn more so I can teach other people to do this. I want to teach other people to get healthy and to feel better, because my capacity for life had increased at that point. So that was my initial kind of like foot in the door, right? And then you can actually go down the schooling track of just getting a nutrition degree and not pursuing an RD credential. But the reason I decided to pursue the RD credential was actually because of my grandmother. She has Crohn's disease, and she has found incredible healing through her nutrition and working with dietitians in the past. And she is 79 years old and not on any medication right now, which is,
Wow.
kind of unheard of for most people with Crohn's.
Yeah.
But she's very adamant about, like, staying on track with what she eats, taking the vitamins and supplements that she needs to be taking and stuff like that. So I just saw that and saw like how, my own personal experience and then the experience of my grandmother and how influential nutrition can be. And so I was like, well, I can only help people like that if I pursue my RD credential. So that's why I decided to go for the rest of that degree.
I love that. And, our family stories and the things we see in the lives of our family members really kind of shape and impact us, especially during those formative years when we're trying to figure out what do we want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I became a pharmacist was because my mom, who she also has Crohn's disease, in watching kind of the role of medications in her life, that made me think, I want to be a part of that. And that's very much your story too. Seeing the role of food and the role of nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
My mom actually had to have her colon removed because of this disorder.
Yeah.
And so, but the power of food, the power of nutrition, just kind of comes alive. And I love that about your story, and you've shared that with me before. So I wanted you to share it with our listeners because I think that there's so much there that I think is encouraging.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it kind of shows us where you've come, and you've, this isn't something in theory. this takes it off the textbook and puts it into real life. And you've seen that, and you wanted to be a part of that. So now you're in this world of nutrition, health, fitness, that sort of thing. And you work with clients. You and your husband do coaching, and I'm sure you see a lot of people on the spectrum of of health and wellness.
Yes.
So, in your experience as a dietitian who's coaching people how to get healthy and how to leverage food and nutrition in a very powerful way, what are some of the most common myths you've seen associated with nutrition today? And then, how do you use your platform to address those?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of kind of what you're talking about around keeping people stuck is a lack of education for one thing. And it's like we're not taught anything about nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, we're just not. And all of
Mm-hmm.
the nutrition information that we come across, especially these days, is all online, right?
Yeah.
Like when I first started getting into bodybuilding, everything, this was before Instagram was really like a thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I got everything from bodybuilding.com and the internet and blogs, right? Like that's where that's where I learned a lot. And so now it's just morphed into short form content.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with that being said, there's a lot of information out there that, like you said, is unfounded and just straight up misinformation, honestly. So
Mm-hmm.
the main ones that I see still, I mean, there's a ton, but if we have to condense it down to just a few big ones, the main one that I see is that this concept of that there's good and bad foods, right? Like we like to believe, oh my gosh, this donut is really bad for me, but if I eat this broccoli, then somehow it's better, right?
Yeah.
When in reality, I know you've heard the phrase everything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another phrase that you probably appreciate as a pharmacist is the dose makes the poison, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And so there's not one food that if you eat it in isolation just one time, that's going to give you a chronic illness,
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is, when these foods are the primary fuel in the diet, right? Because then we're lacking all the nutrients that we need to sustain ourselves. So that's what I like to tell people is like, there's no such thing as good and bad. It's more like we're assigning moral value to it as well. And so when that becomes a problem, when we're labeling things as good as and bad, is when we decide that our behaviors along with those foods are good or
Mm.
bad. And then also we as people are good or bad, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the types of foods that we're eating. And then when we believe we're bad, we're going to try to cut out and restrict all of our favorite foods, right?
Yep.
Because that's what we're supposed to do for health. And then maybe we're successful with that for a month. And then we're back to eating our favorite foods and we're probably overeating them too. And then it just keeps us in this cycle of never actually understanding what food is. And it just continues to complicate our relationship with food. So that's like one
Yeah.
of the biggest ones that I still see just running rampant all over the place.
I see that too. There's this dichotomy, this false dichotomy of sorts. It's either good or bad, and in the reality is it's neither. This is an inanimate object. It's not going to have an inherent moral value to it. But I really love how you kind of walked us down that path of what that means and what harm that does to us, because it's a lot more than just a value we're assigning to that food. Because then if we eat that food, then we become whatever value that we've assigned to that food. So, hey, Oreos are bad. I'm going to pick on Oreos. We would call that a fun food instead of a bad food.
Yeah.
Much better term for it. But if we assign that a bad food, and then if we find ourselves at night or whatever eating a sleeve of Oreos, because let's face it, you're not going to just eat like two.
Yeah.
Then now I am bad because I have eaten that bad food, and then that leads us down this path of shame and blame and fear. And that kind of becomes our motivation behind, okay, I need to eat better because I'm bad.
Mhm.
And that holds us back in a lot of ways. And I can say that with confidence because I've been there. I've experienced exactly that. So
Yeah, me
um,
too. I was in there. I mean, I think
mhm,
we've all experienced it at some point in time, right? Like I mentioned, my introduction into nutrition was through the bodybuilding world. Like
mhm,
it runs rampant in that space.
sure.
And so that, I have lived that as well as like I it's very easy to fall into a space of becoming rigid when we think like that.
Hmm.
And then we're never, like you mentioned, the fuel source behind why we're eating the way we're eating isn't because we're trying to nourish ourselves. It's because we're trying to outrun those negative feelings.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
What other myths? I think you'd mentioned you had a couple in mind, but
Yeah. Another one is you need to eat as little as possible to lose weight. That
hmm,
is, yeah. I see this more so with women than anything. I know
yeah,
that men do still, struggle with this as well. I think it's just more well known in women. But this is, problematic for a few reasons. And the main one is like skipping meals, right? May sound like a good idea. Say we skip breakfast first thing in the morning and we're like, oh, I don't need breakfast, right? But what happens later on in the day when you're hangry and you cannot, when I'm hangry, I just want the closest thing to me. I don't care about eating healthy or
no,
eating anything actually satiating. I
right,
just want the closest thing to me and to satisfy that hunger because it's uncomfortable, right? And
yeah.
so if we're
I need it
skipping
now.
meals, we're constantly trying to have to put ourselves in a position to where like we have to have some strong willpower to like overcome that, right?
Sure.
Um and that's also, we end up overeating. And so again,
Mm,
we're just in this cycle of like, why am I not losing weight? It's because we're skipping meals, not actually satisfying our hunger, and then overeating later on. So that's another big one that I see. And then it can also disrupt like your natural hunger cues as
mhm.
well. The more we continue to do that, which is not good.
And there's been some studies that have been done, and nutrition studies are always interesting because
Yeah.
um, it's hard to really mimic real life a lot of times because things have to
Yeah.
be, there's so many factors to control.
Yeah.
But
So many
um,
variables.
yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I saw recently was, like you said, skipping meals and that sort of thing, and it compared it to eating more frequently, which we're used to doing. And the skipping meals, yeah, that sounds good because hey, I'm condensing into 2 meals what I would normally try to get into 3 meals. But really, what the evidence showed, and it's intuitive, what the evidence showed was that we, like you said, we overeat at those other meals, and we end up, when they compared those two groups, the ones who skipped meals, they actually ate more calories over the course of a day than the ones who didn't. And so,
Exactly.
almost feel like you're doing yourself good, but you're really sabotaging yourself
Yeah.
in most cases because when you get hangry, I could care less what the nutrition is when in what I'm about to eat. I just want something right now because I don't like feeling that way. So,
Yeah.
spot on. Love it.
Exactly. And then also there's another like kind of manifestation of that of trying to eat as little as possible in people equating large volumes of food with high calories. So
Okay.
if we're used to eating a diet that is calorically dense, right? Say a lot of processed foods, a lot of fast food, you usually don't get a lot of food, like volume wise, for the amount of calories that you're eating. So when we switch to more nutrient dense whole foods, the volume is going to go up for the amount of
Hmm.
calories that you're getting. And that can be like a mind switch on a lot of people. They're like, whoa, 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 this is too much food. I can't eat this much food
Yeah.
because we're just used to eating as little as possible and thinking like that's what we need to do is eat as little as possible when in reality we have to nourish our bodies adequately and the volume of food doesn't always equate calories.
What does, in your experience, what does fast food do whenever we're going from these whole food, nutrient dense products that are healthy for us and they nourish our bodies in ways that they need to be nourished? But then, if we eat a lot of this fast food, this highly processed food, what does that do to our bodies as far as you mentioned the normal hunger cues and that sort of thing? What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so when we're eating a lot of fast food, we're not going to be eating a lot of fiber. So we're going to be breaking these foods down a lot more quickly. And so we're not
Hmm.
going to be feeling very full for very long. And
Right.
so we're going to actually want to eat again soon because also this has an effect on our blood sugar, right? If we're not eating enough fiber, our blood sugar is going to spike and then it's going to
Mm.
dip really fast. And when we
Yep.
dip, that's when we're going to have all those cravings. That's when we're going to get hungry again, right? That's signaling our body that hey, it's time to eat. So
Hmm.
if we're not adding to that to help it, help our bodies digest at a slower rate, we're overall going to end up eating more throughout the course of the day, which is not what we want if we're primarily eating those calorically dense foods as far as like a weight perspective goes.
Yeah.
And then there's also like the nutrients, right? Like if that's all we're eating, we're likely not meeting our micronutrient needs either.
Hmm.
So there can be several physical manifestations of that if, that continues on for long enough. And then like you're just not going to feel very good as far as like
Hmm.
energy is concerned. You're going to probably be more tired all the time. You likely aren't hydrating enough either. So it's really just kind of like the perfect storm of things that can make you not feel that great.
Yeah, sure. And when we think about it, these highly processed foods or these fast foods, they were not created to nourish our bodies. They
Yeah.
were not created to be healthy. They were created with one purpose in mind, and that is to taste good.
Hmm.
At whatever cost. And we're starting to see some of those repercussions. And I'm not saying that I never eat fast food or processed foods. Again, it's that whole concept of the dose is what matters.
Hmm.
In moderation. But by and large, we don't make that a large part of our diet. That's the exception, not the rule for sure. But it's very tempting in our society and in the world we live in to make that a staple. And we're starting to see this malnourishment. We're starting to see the obesity epidemic that we're living in right now. One thing
Hmm.
you said to me before is that obesity is a disease of malnutrition.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that really caught my attention. Can you expound on that just a little bit? What do you mean by obesity is
Hmm.
a disease of malnutrition?
Sure. Yeah, I think when we think about malnutrition, our minds automatically go to someone who's starved,
Yeah,
right? We think of
emaciated.
someone who's
Right.
really skinny, who hasn't had any food or any energy, right? But the other end of the spectrum exists too.
Hmm.
If someone is obese, right, like they likely aren't getting the nutrients that they need if they're, especially if their diet is consumed of all the fast food products and processed foods that we're talking about, right? Our bodies likely aren't working in the way that they need to be. So they're also malnourished in that
Hmm.
sense. But someone's body weight does not dictate whether they're nourished or not, right? Like you can be
Hmm.
on that spectrum and be malnourished.
Sure, sure. Um, so speaking of that, one of the most common questions that I get is the question of what is the best diet out there?
Mhm.
There are so many to choose from. Some of them have reviews online that you can find. There's all kind of conflicting information out there. What would you, as a registered dietitian and the credentials that you have, what would you say is the best diet?
I love this question. The best diet is one that is satiating and satisfying.
Okay.
And a diet that is satiating or promotes satiety is one like what we talked about earlier, one that has adequate protein and adequate fiber, and we're getting all the nutrients that our bodies need to function well on a day-to-day basis, right? So that means getting in a variety of whole fruits and vegetables, whole grains in there, making sure we're getting enough protein in, making sure we're staying adequately hydrated, also eating healthy fats,
Hmm.
making sure all of those components we're getting in on a daily basis. And then a diet that is satisfying is what we've talked about with those fun foods, right?
Hmm.
Is making sure you're adding foods in that genuinely make you excited to eat. Because if we're not, feeling satisfied by our foods, it's just kind of boring, right? Like
Yep.
we use food to celebrate. We use food to be social, right? Like, and all of those things around food are great. There's no reason to cut those out. So making sure we're having that satisfaction factor is the key to any kind of long-term success with diet. So those are the two kind of main guidelines like that I like to tell people that is like the best diet.
Absolutely love that. Um, and it's counterintuitive a little bit because when you
Yeah.
think about dieting, at least with my experience, when you think about dieting, you think, okay, I've got to be strict and I've got to be strict for a long time. And so then we think, all right, so the longer I'm strict, the more weight that I'm going to lose. And there's this concept of, okay, these are foods that I can have and these are foods that I can't have. But one of the things I love, and I can testify that eating pattern that you just described as the best diet um, is successful
Mhm.
in being able to work that into my life is having some of those fun foods on occasion. when you're on a diet, you think you can't have any of those foods until you're past the diet, until you've met your goal. You think literally the carrot, dangling in front of you, except it's not a carrot. It's, whatever fun food that you can't have that you're depriving yourself of. But really what you're saying is that it's good to have those on occasion because that's going to help you be consistent. Can you talk a little bit more about that? It sounds counterintuitive. Okay, you can have the fun foods, but tell us a little bit about the structure of how that needs to happen.
Yeah. So one of the main things that I help people with, as a dietitian, people just assume I'm going to tell them exactly what to eat, right? Like they come to me and they're like, "Tell me what to eat. I'm open to whatever." And then I tell them, I'm like, "Okay, well, what do you like to eat?"
Yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah,
what are your favorite foods? Because that's where we need to start. And
I like that.
yeah, and so I think a lot of times when we're dieting, we viewed as a short-term thing, right?
Hmm.
This is just something I'm going to do for the short term so I can lose some weight, and then I'll figure the rest out later. But why that doesn't work is because if you're not trying to incorporate that into your lifestyle as your life exists right now,
Hmm.
you're never going to be able to stick to it. You're probably going to gain the weight back and then you're just going to be frustrated. So by adding these foods in, it's really just living your life the way it was and then adding nutrition into it rather than taking things away. So I
Yeah,
like to, add addition, not subtraction. That's the key takeaway there
sure.
is for sustainability purposes. It's like, and for longevity, if this is something you're serious about adopting and trying to have a healthy lifestyle, like we have to add things in and not be so, like you said, strict about it. And then when it comes to cheat meals, like that's why I don't usually use that term because I
Hmm.
don't really believe in cheat meals. I believe you can, if you're wanting a meal of some kind of like fun food, like say you want to go out for fast food, I would rather you honor that craving in the moment rather than stew on it, right? Try to eat something else to try to satisfy that craving.
Yeah,
Eat more of those something else's for, more calories than maybe what that meal would have been.
sure.
Um, Rather than just satisfying your craving in the moment and that just being that. So I hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the further we pass this craving down, the stronger it becomes.
Yes.
And this is I've seen this time and time again. And then we say, "All right, I don't have enough willpower to not do this anymore." And then we give in. But if we're in
Mhm.
that diet mentality, we think, "Well, I've crashed my diet." And it's Thursday, so I may as
Yeah.
well just
It's the weekend
skip this
already,
week.
so here we are.
Yeah, yeah, it's Friday Eve, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna get off my diet for the weekend, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
get back. There's something magical we think about Mondays. I'm
Yeah.
gonna get back on Monday. We've been saying that for years, right? I'm gonna be,
Get
come
back on
Monday, I'm
Monday.
gonna do right again. It's that diet mentality. And
It
then
is.
the next week, it may be Wednesday and we slip up again and we give into our cravings. And, we're like, oh man, well, I only lasted 3 days this week, but I guess I'll just try again next Monday. And then now we're looking no different than what we looked like beforehand. We're eating all the same things because we're off of our diet 3 to 4 days a week anyway.
Yeah.
This old diet mentality thing just doesn't work long term.
No. Because it's
And
not putting you at the center. Like trying to follow a diet plan that you found online or that your favorite influencer is doing or someone you saw on YouTube that's doing or one of your coworkers has done and has been successful, right? That has nothing to do with you.
yeah, I like
Has
that.
nothing to do with your lifestyle.
Hmm.
It is just a cookie cutter thing that maybe you can do for a short term. But as far as like, if we really want to get to the root and like be done with this for good, you have to put yourself back into the equation and start really prioritizing your values and your needs and what you want nutrition and a healthy lifestyle to fuel for yourself.
Absolutely. Health is a marathon, not a sprint. Um, particularly when we think about nutrition, because we think, all right, I'm going to be on this diet, and I've had people ask me, how long do I need to eat right? That's what we call it. We eat right. And it's strange. We live in a world where, if we eat healthy, it's called a diet. Um, that's to me that alone says a lot, right? That healthy eating is something we see as a short term thing. But how long do I need to eat right in order to lose X pounds? And then once I lose X pounds, what do? We go right back to what we were doing before, and then give it a few months, and you're right back where you were. It's going to yo-yo. You're going to be up and down, and I'm not sure that there's really a whole lot of net benefit to that. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit, but thinking about it as a marathon versus, okay, I'm going to get through this. It's a short-term thing, but then I'm going to just yo-yo right back.
Yeah. Again, I think it comes back to, viewing like, okay, this is why I don't like putting timelines on weight loss either. Okay. Because if we have the expectation of like, I'm going to lose X amount of pounds in 6 months, and then, like you said, what's next? And then it's a question of, why are you even doing this in the first place? And it's like, why do you want to lose weight? What do you want to gain from losing weight?
Right.
And then that becoming the fuel source for forever, right? Like my, goal for being healthy is like, I want to be an active person. Patrick and I are planning on going backpacking the rim to rim at the Grand Canyon this year. I mountain bike, like I'm very active. Like those things fuel why I want to eat healthy and exercise, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I think it comes down to like figuring out why you want what you're wanting. And if it's just to look better, like, sure, that's fine, but that's not going to sustain you long term either. The vanity metrics are not going to sustain you. I've been there, right? I lost 25 pounds and I gained probably half of it back, right? Because all I cared about was the vanity metrics. Like I've been there.
Yep.
So I get why people fall victim to that. And it's also, if we think about it from a higher up perspective, if we zoom out a little bit, diet culture and the weight loss industry has sold us this idea that that's how it is. You buy this program, in 6 months your problems are solved, and then that's it, you're done, right? When in reality, your health follows you everywhere and in every pursuit in life. So it doesn't just go away.
Sure. I really like how you hit on the fact that we're kind of marketed this short-term mindset. 3 months to your best body, 60 days to the bikini body, or whatever the case may be. It all has a timeline associated with it. And so one of the things you and Patrick are really working to do is to really help people make health as part of their daily life, every day, not for the next month, not for the next 2 months. But when you start seeing things as, okay, this is something I'm in for the duration of my life, that changes how you see food. That changes your relationship with food. Yes. And you start saying, okay, I don't have to cram all this in because I'm going on a diet tomorrow. This is going to be a bad food for me for the next 3 months. Instead of thinking of it that way, hey, I can have this occasionally. When that craving really hits me, and probably not on a daily basis, but when that craving hits me, hey, you know what? Go ahead and give in to that. That's not a failure. That's called being a human.
Yeah.
You're going to have those cravings. We're not robots. We aren't made to work like robots, and we can't just say, eat this every day, and that's the way it's going to be forever.
Yeah. And food is inherently supposed to be delicious for us to want to engage with it. Right? If you think about it, it's like food has to be appealing for us to want to eat it. Right. Which, like you said, sounds counterintuitive, and it sounds like, too good to be true, but it's honestly the truth. And it is like the antidote to a lot of problems, is if we just give ourselves permission to eat. But we have to come to terms with most of the nutrition information we have ever come across in our life has been through the lens of dieting and, weight loss at any cost. That's another mindset that I see. So most nutrition information that you come across will be through those filters, rather than trying to help you sustain these habits in the long term.
So one of the things I love about the picture that you're painting is that it's a picture of simplicity. We've really made this thing too complicated in a lot of different ways. And so, kind of as we wrap up a little bit here, if there's someone listening and they're just interested in, okay, now's the time to take control of my health. It's time that I really kind of rein in the eating. I've got an issue with this. Kind of what would be the one single most important factor that someone could start incorporating today to make the biggest impact? Because sometimes I think that we get so overwhelmed because there's all this information out there and we don't know which ones to incorporate. We don't know which ones are true. And there's just so much to do. Simplicity is oftentimes the answer. So what would be your advice to someone in that situation?
And I know you're going to love this answer because I know this has been helpful for you, but slowing the heck down is my number one go-to is, if you're skipping breakfast because you're rushing out the door, if you're skipping lunch because you're too busy with work, my challenge to you is just let's practice slowing down, right? Like just pick one meal to sit at the table, no screens, no distractions, engage with your food, and actually see what comes up for you. Because when we practice being mindful around food, we give ourselves the space to understand why we're not consistent, right? And where all of these patterns come from. It gives us room for reflection. So that's my biggest kind of starting point for people. And it seems, like you said, really simple, but it can have a huge, huge impact on, just understanding our relationship with food a little bit better.
One of the things I've even discovered is there's some things that I have been eating and that I would say, hey man, I really like that food. That's a really fun food. But when I slow down and I really start trying to taste it and I really start trying to say, how does this make me feel? I'm not that impressed.
Yeah.
And so, it's not worth, at that point, it's not worth the calories. It's not worth the lack of nutrition that I'm getting to partake in that food. And so I would rather prioritize another food over that. If I'm going to have a fun food, let's have one that I really like. And so just pausing, not being in such a rush, eat without distractions, chew slowly, taste your food. You'd be shocked the difference that makes in your relationship with your food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of times we just get caught up in routine and pattern. Like you mentioned, being at work and just having to shove stuff down to prevent hunger, right? So that's why like you said, really slowing down, tasting your food, giving yourself the chance to just enjoy it. Food shouldn't be this, boring thing, this inconvenient thing, right? Like we're supposed to nourish ourselves. It's one of the foundation pillars of health is our nutrition, right? Like we have to have it to be healthy. So why not engage in it in a way that is actually satisfying to you?
Love it. So powerful. Well, Meagan, thank you so much for being here with us. I wanted to give our listeners an opportunity to find out where to find more about you, the coaching that you're offering alongside Patrick, your handles, that sort of thing. So if someone wants to find out a little bit more information that you're putting out there, how would they go about entering into your world?
Sure. First would be on social media. I'm on Instagram at mryan, so M for Meagan, Ryan _nutrition. That is my Instagram handle. And then also we have a free fitness community on Facebook called the Aware Fitness Community. You're welcome to join that as well. And then, you can also add me on Facebook, Meagan Ryan. Happy to be your friend.
And I'll also have all that in the show notes as well for you guys that want to check out what Meagan's doing. So thank you so much for being here. Just truly a privilege to be able to sit down and just have this conversation together. Appreciate the work that you're doing and that you and Patrick are doing in the Aware Fitness community. And I hope you have a fantastic afternoon. Thanks everybody for listening.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.